I always work the closing shift at Pizza Hut by myself. Last night someone found out I was alone. Pizza Hut has been one of the best and worst jobs I've ever had. I'll start with the reasons why it's been good before jumping right into the bad stuff. It's going to make explaining what happened to me last night a lot easier if you know a little backstory. For a business that constantly reminds me how cheap it is, it pays me well enough as an assistant manager. The work is typically repetitive and simple, and my days they usually melt together as it's more or less the same routine every day. Deal with customers. Make the pizzas and wings. Call the Pepsi company and complain our order is late for the third time in a row. There's the odd time when things get tense. We get angry/complaining customers every few days, but every workplace that deals with customer service gets those. Thankfully, it never usually takes more than a free pizza or a credit on their next order to make them happy again. For the past 11 months, I have been the restaurant's main closer. My shifts never change from 4 to 11 or 4 to 12 on Fridays and Saturdays. Once in a while, I'll get scheduled for a 10 to 6 or 11 to 7 shift if one of our openers is sick, but that's pretty rare. However, it does happen. Since I live in such a small town, my Pizza Hut only deals with takeout and delivery orders. There is no dine-in area at all except a couple of bar tables and stools by the main entrance for people to wait for their orders. The front lobby of the restaurant is tiny and the kitchen is no exception. The entire back area is pretty much one big room, with a little area behind a wall in the back that doubles as the prep area and office. There is no break room or employee bathroom. We do have one bathroom at the front for customers, right next to the pop cooler by the entrance to the kitchen. Now that you know a little about how the restaurant looks and runs, I'll move on to why it isn't a good place to work at the best of times. First off, I'm one of the only 5 people that work there. My boss and 2 of my other employees are contract workers from India, so English isn't their first language. They never talk in English when it's just me and them, so I'm always a little out of the loop. My other coworker works only part-time since she's still in high school. So with her there only a few hours a week, I spend the majority of my time working without talking too much to my other coworkers. It can get pretty lonely. Now a little about me. I just turned 20. I'm a smaller female and I live about 10 minutes away from work. That's 10 minutes walking one way. I don't have my license or a car. This typically doesn't bother me, but it does get kind of scary when I'm walking home in the dark after midnight. Thankfully, the walk to my house is in a pretty good part of town. I've yet to run into any real issues. Other than the language barrier between me and most of my coworkers, the only real problem comes from the night shifts. Since one person is fully capable of doing all the closing duties, I am left there by myself from 8 p.m. onwards. This means I have to answer the phones, help the customers, and make all the orders. It's not usually busy, so I never have a problem with that, unless there's the odd time where I get 4 or 5 orders at once. But I am fast at making pizzas. I can usually get them made and in the oven within a minute and a half of the order being taken. The real problem with being alone on closing shifts is explained within this very sentence. I'm there all alone. It can be kind of spooky sometimes if there's someone weird that comes in. Anyone could rob me or hurt me, and there would be no one there to help. I've talked to my boss about my concerns, but he always dismisses me, saying I'm a phone call away if you need help. We should not have to pay a second person to do your job. Jerk. Last night, I worked my usual close. Since it was Sunday, I only had to stay until 11, but it felt like I was there for hours more. Last night, my fears of what would happen when I was alone came true. My shift went normally for half the day. By the time 8 o'clock rolled around, I had said goodbye to my morning crew and had already started on the closing checklist. Weird stuff started happening around 9:30. I was making dough in the back, taking my time with it since there was not much else to do. I heard the beep beep of the doorbell, and automatically I spun around, looking up at the TV displaying real-time footage of the front lobby. I stared at it for a few seconds, confused. The front was empty, and I could not see anyone out the windows outside. Convinced I had imagined it, I carried on with my dough. I greased and oiled 5 more pans, finishing the stack. I stacked them on top of each other and picked them up, turning around to check the camera again before I carried the dough into the walk-in cooler. My heart leaped painfully in my chest and I fumbled with the stack, nearly dropping them all on the floor. A man was standing in the lobby, peering into the kitchen. At once I set the pans down, wiping my hands on my apron before I ran out to greet him. He had shocked me, but I got over it quickly. I figured he must have been standing in the blind spot the last time I checked the camera, the spot where I used to hide when taking extra breaks so my boss couldn't see what I was doing. "Hi there," I called out as I walked quickly over. "Sorry about that, I didn't see you come in. What would you like to order?" "I didn't see you come in," the man repeated my words. "I didn't see you come in." I stood still for a second, not knowing what to say. I was getting a really bad vibe from this guy, and as he spoke it got worse. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself with little success that I was being silly. The man looked average enough, despite being very dirty. He was very tall and looked older than my dad. But he was dressed strangely. He was wearing a shiny light blue dress shirt tucked into gray-stained sweatpants. His sweatpants were tucked into his socks. His hair was greasy and combed to the side. His pockets were stuffed with what appeared to be all the mints I had in the jar near the menus. He smelled like he hadn't had a shower in weeks. "Can I take your order?" I asked again, but my voice lacked questioning. It sounded more like a timid statement, and I wondered what this guy's problem was. It took a long time, but finally, he ordered a small pepperoni pizza with 8 boneless wings. I rang his order in quickly, happy he had finally said something. I couldn't help but notice the way his mouth moved when he talked. It went just straight up and down like a doll. He didn't have any teeth and his breath nearly made me gag. "I'll have your order ready in 10 minutes, I said, placing his change on the table. I thanked him again and walked into the kitchen, wishing there was a door instead of an empty frame leading into the kitchen. I didn't want him to get curious and look in again. I went into the walk-in, grabbing a small pan to make his pizza. Before I got started on it, I checked the camera again, feeling a little better when I saw the man sitting at the bar table reading what looked like a menu from the front counter. Convinced he was just not all there and most likely homeless, I ignored my gut feeling that something was wrong and prepared his order. I had the pizza in the oven in under 30 seconds. I dropped his wings in a basket and set the timer on the fryer, 6 minutes to kill before they're ready. I took this as an opportunity to check my phone. I picked it up just in time. I was receiving a call from my friend Lana. "Hey," I said into the phone. "You caught me just as I was taking a few minutes break. What's up? Hurry up and be done with work." Lana cried, sounding irritated. "I'm so bored." "1 more hour," I said after glancing at the clock. 10 p.m. I was startled by this. It felt like I had just looked at the clock. Half an hour had gone by since the man had come in. "Lana, you should walk over and pick me up," I said in a low voice. "There's this weirdo here and he's giving me the creeps." "Are you alone again?" Lana asked, sounding concerned. "Yeah," I mumbled into the phone. I tried to talk to my boss about it again, but he never does anything. Anyways, I'll see you in a bit. I hung up the phone just as the fryer timer started to beep. The wings were done. I threw my phone in my bag and walked around the corner to the main part of the kitchen. I sauced the wings and cut the pizza, carrying the order to the front while looking forward to seeing the man leave. I looked around and felt my knees grow weak again. The front was empty. The stool the man had been sitting on was jetted out. The menu he was reading was on the ground. This completely freaked me out. I hadn't heard the doorbell, so he couldn't have left. My eyes drifted over to the bathroom door. The handle button was horizontal, meaning it was locked from the inside. This made me feel a little better. He was just in the bathroom. There's nothing wrong with that. I stood at the till, aimlessly looking through stuff as I waited for him to come out so I could give him his order. I looked down at the bottom of the screen at the time. 10:15 p.m. 10:21 p.m. 10:34 p.m. He had been in there for a good half hour before I mustered the courage to knock on the door. "Everything all right in there?" I called out. At once I could hear shuffling, as if I had startled him. I backed up, preparing for him to come out. The shuffling then stopped, but he still didn't open the door. I walked closer again, raising my fist to bang on the door again when I heard a click. The door had unlocked. 10:40 p.m. I was at a loss for what to do. I had grown very paranoid and I now knew something was wrong, but at the same time, I couldn't just stand there and wait for something to happen. It was 20 minutes to close and I still had a few things to do. I braced myself to open the door and deal with it when I heard him whispering, "One more hour, one more hour, Lana." I jumped back like I had been burned. He was recycling my words again, from earlier when I was on the phone. But I was in the back of the kitchen behind the wall. There's no way he could have heard me, unless he had crept back there and listened in. I backed away from the door and grabbed the phone, dialing my boss's number. My hands shook as I struggled to press the buttons. Bright lights suddenly distracted me, and I looked up to see a car pulling into the parking lot. I thanked my lucky stars as two people got out and walked towards the restaurant, holding hands. However, seconds before they could open the door, the bathroom door creaked open. My heart pounded as I looked over, not sure what I should prepare myself to see. The man looked the same as before, except covered in sweat, and he was panting like a dog. His hair was sticking up everywhere like he was pulling on it. Beep beep, the couple walked in, looking curiously at the giant menu a few feet over my head. As I turned to look at them, the man suddenly leaped forward, making me scream and jump back. But he didn't touch me. He grabbed his order, sat on the counter, and then bolted out. And I mean bolted. He ran like someone was trying to kill him, across the highway and into the neighborhood beyond. The relief I felt when he was finally gone was explainable. I was nearly laughing when I took the customer's order, so dizzy I could hardly keep it together. I rang in what they wanted and raced to the back to prepare my last order of the night. 10:52 p.m. With the customers in the front, I felt comfortable enough to look out the windows and make sure the man had not returned. It was dark, but I could see enough, and after a good few minutes of checking things out, I decided it was safe to say he was gone for good. I was also starting to wonder where Lana was and hoped she hadn't run into the creep. 10:57 p.m. I brought out the customer's order and they thanked me, leaving me no tip, but I wasn't expecting one after they saw me scream as the man grabbed his order. As soon as they drove away, I turned off the open sign and raced to the back to grab my things. I put my jacket on and went to the back area to turn off the computer system, realizing I forgot to check the bathroom to make sure the man hadn't done anything weird in there. I dismissed the thought. I wasn't going to spend any more time here than needed. I've had enough for today. The computer made a few beeping sounds as the entire system shut down, and the light above me went out like it was supposed to. The only thing on now was the security camera, and I glanced up at it hoping to see Lana walking over. Something bothered me about what I saw. The front was empty and dark, but I could still see the shapes and shadows of things. There was no one inside but me. I used the master switchboard next to the computer to turn the front light on, and I nearly had a heart attack. The man was standing outside the door, not moving and staring in through the glass. It's hard for me to remember everything that happened next. All I can recall is running into the walk-in cooler and locking myself in as I called the police from my cell phone. I remember crying as I tried to recall to them what exactly had happened. They drove me home and promised to keep a lookout for him, but that didn't make me feel much better. I felt like they didn't entirely believe me, but I was sort of expecting that. I went to work early the next morning, still terribly paranoid even though it was the middle of the day with lots of people around. I was going to tell my boss I couldn't work nights anymore, starting now. There's no way I'd put myself through that again. I opened the door and my coworker gave me a grim look, looking not at all pleased as he motioned for me to look over at the bathroom door. It was covered in caution tape, with a giant sign that read out of order. I asked everyone I worked with what happened there, but no one gave me a straight answer. I'll never know how to fully explain what happened last night. I feel somewhat safe knowing I won't have to work alone ever again, but one thing has been bothering me since it happened. Lana walked here to pick me up, and that man was outside. I've been calling her all day. Each time it goes to voicemail. Never work late alone. This is a true story. I still get freaked out thinking about it today. I recently moved to a new city, and since I was living alone until I could find a roommate, I got into the habit of working late hours and sometimes even leaving the office at 2 in the morning. I didn't have a problem with it, and my apartment wasn't too far from the office building I worked at. I'm going to leave the company name out of this for obvious reasons. Getting back home that late at night wasn't an issue for me because I could easily grab a cab that late at night, and there were still enough people on the street that didn't make me feel completely alone and vulnerable. Well, that's what I believed until one particular night. It wasn't the greatest of weather that week. It had been snowing quite a bit, and even for the city, you could tell not as many people wanted to venture out in weather like that. Anyway, being the idiot I was, I decided it wouldn't hurt to put in a few more hours in the office and make some overtime money to fund some things on my Christmas wish list. The office was emptier than usual that day, which was pretty expected because people were either on vacation / trying to avoid the bad weather outside. Now, my office building has 10 levels and we're a small firm that takes up only one of the 10 floors, so I only have access to one floor. On the other floors, I can't use my ID to get in. Anyway, it was a pretty laid-back day. I came into the office late in the morning because of the snow, so obviously I had to put in some more hours later in the day than usual to make up for the time I lost. Even as I walked in at 11 a.m., I could tell I was probably one of the very few people in the building. The regular rush of people in the main foyer was almost non-existent. It was a normal workday, pretty slow. But by 3 p.m. the few people in the office had already begun to leave because the weather network was warning of another heavy snowfall later in the day. I wasn't worried. Home was a few subway stops or a small cab ride away. And anyway, I'd be making extra overtime for working on pretty much nothing. I wasn't cheating the company, but hey, I needed the money. By this time, it was nearing 5 p.m. Nothing out of the ordinary. The sky seemed pretty dark, to the point where I could walk to the windows and just see my reflection. It looked like night outside. I heard the last few people packing up to go home for an extra long weekend if the snowstorm was really bad the next day. So I grabbed a quick dinner from the one little coffee store open on the main floor of the building, and by the time I came back up to my cubicle, it felt like any late night I spent in the office, complete silence. I sat back behind my desk, 3 walls made up my corner cubicle, and just bummed around on the internet for a few hours. I procrastinated the work I wanted to finish before the weekend so I wouldn't have to come in the next day, and before I knew it, it was nearing 10 p.m. I could hear the storm howling outside, to the point where the sky looked dark gray rather than black. There was an eerie glow of a light red from the giant billboard across the street from our building. And like on schedule, the main lights above me turned off at exactly 10:10 p.m. I sighed just before reaching to turn on my desk light. Looks like I was the last one on the floor, again. I decided I'd leave at exactly 11 p.m., clock in 12 hours of work, and at least make some overtime pay. So I kept typing on the computer, trying to find a way to kill the last 50 minutes before I could leave. And that's when I heard something. At first, I thought it was nothing. Probably the wind howling. Didn't bother me, so I just kept working away. Then just half a minute later, I'd hear it again. A soft shuffle. Almost like socks rubbing against the carpet. I looked over my shoulder, my back view partially covered by the cubicle wall behind me. Nothing. I tried to focus my attention back on the computer. The brightness was starting to strain my eyes, making them water a bit. Just as I reached up to rub them, again I hear that effing sound. Shuffling. The sound getting a bit more distinct now. I moved a bit on my chair, making the spring squeak a bit. The shuffling stopped immediately. Quickly I went onto our office's MSN, checking to see if anyone was still online. No, I was the only one with the green man beside my name. Everyone had left. That's when I started to get a bit panicked. So I got up and started walking in the opposite direction from where I was hearing this shuffling, which I had begun to recognize as something between papers rustling and something slowly dragging its feet on the carpeted floor. There wasn't anywhere really to go, just the long hallway that led to the men's and women's bathrooms and a few meeting rooms. Faster than I meant to, I pretty much booked it to the hallway, feeling this weird sensation like I was being watched from behind. Just as I got into the bathroom, I locked the door behind me. This was a public bathroom, but whatever, and took a deep breath. I'm being fucking stupid, I thought to myself, almost laughing. I've been here later than this. The security in this building is awesome, right? I took a long leak, giving me some time to relieve that nervous energy. Purposely, I took some time getting to the door, unlocking it, and peering outside. The lights in this hallway were on, but they were dim. Looked left and right, nothing. I gently closed the door behind me so it wouldn't make a sound, and started walking slowly back to my desk. But even as I tried to convince myself that there wasn't anything/anyone here, I couldn't help but feel uneasy and scared. Goosebumps were forming on my arms, even with the heat blast inside the building. I think what made it worse was the lack of lighting. Even from at least 30 feet away, the only light I could see was the small desk lamp on my desk. Everything else was so dark. And instantly, I began to think that there was something out there, waiting for me from the corners. I decided then to grab my stuff and go. I didn't care if my computer was still on. I still didn't expect to see what I saw. I rounded the corner and was just about to sit on my desk when my eyes glanced up at the screen. I had a Word document open that I was typing a proposal on when I left minutes ago. Instead of the words I thought I had written, I just saw one phrase typed over and over again. I am here, I am here, I am here, I am here. I just remember going cold. I was in shock for that 1 second, and I wanted to run so badly, but my legs weren't fucking going anywhere. Then I felt it, like something breathing down my neck. That feeling like there was someone right behind me even though I knew it was just space. But I felt like if I turned around I'd be screwed. It was the worst feeling I've felt in my life. So just as I was going to turn around and run for it, I almost squealed like a little girl when my desk phone started ringing. It took me a second to get my hand on the phone because it was shaking so badly. Quickly, I looked at the screen. Security X5000, holy shit. I just remember thinking to myself, holy shit, holy shit. I grabbed the receiver and held it to my ear. I couldn't even say hello, but I'm pretty sure the guy on the other end could hear my heavy breathing. Hello? John? Is this John? I said yes, but I still sounded like a little girl. John, this is building security. Listen to me closely, okay? Get out of there, right now. Our monitors picked up something on your floor. Look, just get out of there. Go to the main lobby. Do you understand? I wanted to say something, to prove to the guy that I understood. But at that very moment, I heard a laugh behind me. In the dark. And I sprinted. I can't even explain how I made it. I remember practically dislocating my arm when I banged into the walls, running in the dark, not sure where I was going. But just out of here. I just wanted to get out of here. I ran like my life depended on it. I was so scared I felt my entire body go numb, those words repeating over and over in my fucking mind. I am here. The sound of the security guy's voice sounded so frickin' urgent. And that laugh. What the fuck was that laugh? Where was it coming from? I crashed into the wall, pretty much smashing the buttons and praying an elevator came fast. I couldn't even look over my shoulder, where now I could distinctly hear something running in the dark, that shuffling noise getting so much louder. Oh my God, was all I remember saying at that moment. I was punching the elevator buttons now. What were seconds felt honestly like hours. I can't ever remember being so scared in my life. And then I saw an elevator door open, and I ran inside, tripping on my feet onto the elevator floor. I almost crawled to the elevator buttons, pushing any number I saw, just praying that this stupid thing got me out of there, away from whatever was out there. When the elevator doors finally closed, I felt a bit of relief. Just a bit. Then, as I tried to relax, I heard that dreadful sound. I looked up at the little digital screen of the elevator and saw it flash red. My jaw dropped. The stupid elevator wasn't going anywhere. I looked at the buttons I had pressed, and not one of them was on the main floor. And since I didn't have my stupid access card with me, the stupid thing was going to stay put on floor 7. Then I panicked. In less than a minute, the elevator doors were going to open. And when they opened, that thing was going to be there waiting for me. Who the EFF knew what that was? I felt almost like I was going to go into a panic attack. Or even a heart attack. Then just as the doors began to open an inch, another inch, I lost it. I slammed the emergency button so hard that it got stuck. The elevator immediately began to beep, and thank God the elevator doors stopped, but there was still a little gap there, enough for me to stick a few fingers through. I heard the security guy's voice again, this time in the elevator. He knew it was me in here, and he was almost shouting, "John! John, are you okay? Look, stay there, okay? We're coming up. We'll get help. Just stay there. Hurry the fuck up," I shouted to the little speaker thing in the elevator. "I don't know what's out there, then I screamed bloody murder. I just remember backing so hard into the railing behind me in the elevator that my head began to spin and I was seeing little white stars everywhere. I felt like I was going to have a heart attack right there. My head was killing me when it hit the railing. I could already feel it swelling. But all I could look at was a single black eye staring at me through the crack in the elevator doors. And an inch of a smile on a dark-colored face. And fingers. Fingers trying to reach towards me through the crack. I still get major goosebumps telling this story. I think at that moment I passed out in shock, and from the minor head injury I gave myself in the elevator. When I woke up, I was surrounded by a bunch of cops, and some guys I recognized wearing the building security uniforms. When I came to, they told me what had happened. Some crazy homeless guy had sneaked into the building that day through the underground garage. Security cameras didn't pick it up until much later that night. When the lights went off after 10 p.m. in the building, he'd somehow gotten through the access-protected stairwell that led from the garage to each of the floors. And because there was no one there to report him, he kept wandering around until he ended up on our office floor. I felt myself relax a bit when the cops told me this. Just a homeless guy, I kept telling myself. Nothing paranormal. Thank God. But then the cops told me he had a machete on him when they grabbed him that night. Even worse, they found severed squirrel heads and a cat head in his jacket pockets. They said they were glad security told me on time. But even after that, I couldn't sleep for weeks. I moved back home within the month. Why I'll never work alone. They always leave the TVs on at work. For entertainment purposes, I guess. I saw it as a waste of energy, but it seemed like large corporations always worried about your waste of their money more than theirs, so I never bothered to push them to change it. As a wide open, converted warehouse-type space, the acoustics in my office were strange. I'd never hear much from any one individual TV, but since there was one in each of the 3 break areas, their overlap made for some interesting mixes. Sometimes I'd try to figure out what was on each TV, Family Feud being the easiest to detect, but for the most part the various sportscasts, news reports, and sitcoms just kind of blended and got ignored. After dark, the noises could get spooky. Hearing whispers in the empty office would always raise the hairs on my neck, especially when added to the thuds from the air conditioner and the various creaks and bumps that no amount of renovation could ever truly remove from a building as old as this one. Early on in my switch to the non-traditional shifts, I'd walk around and turn them off. Eventually, though, a missing remote caused the management on the sales side of the floor to lock up the remotes after 5, and I was too short to reach the TVs themselves. Thus began the odd, constant soundtrack to complement my work. By the second year of my mostly alone employment, a strategy dreamt up by management to avoid unanswered customer emails after hours by having at least one person in-house from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. A mixture of the lackluster administration and low pay resulted in a rather small interest level on my part. I'd answer the phones when they rang, respond to emails when they came in, and do just enough of the high-priority work left uncompleted by the day shifters to prove I did something and spend the rest of the time relaxing. Listening to music, watching movies on my phone, or reading articles online always helped me pass the time more quickly. One Friday night in early October, however, that all changed. The days had just begun getting noticeably shorter, so when it started getting dark around 6:30, I didn't think too much of it. It would be pitch black by the time I left at 10 either way, so I just continued sipping my pop and watching Teen Mom on my phone with my headphones in. At 22, I wasn't exactly known for being responsible with my belongings, and my headphones were nearly broken from having been shoved into my purse carelessly so many times. The cord had 3 knots in it at this point, and the speakers were pretty well shot. Every time the volume passed above a certain level, the speech would become distorted and have a low hum under the tone, like a bad TV from the 90s. Anyone who has watched Teen Mom knows that with the amount of yelling at people they do, that volume threshold was crossed pretty well constantly. I was too cheap to pay for commercial-free Hulu, so whenever the commercials came on, I'd generally pull out my earphones and fiddle through the papers on my desk for a minute or so to avoid listening to whatever nonsense they were peddling that day. Once my ears were free of this week's mom drama, though, I realized that the purring noise still existed outside of the work-free zone I'd created. I stood up, deciding against bothering to put my ballet flats back on, and wandered around the deserted floor, looking for the noise. I suppose I was pretty well invisible to the sales brokers on the other side of the department because they generally turned off most of the lights when they left at 6, leaving only the dimmed emergency lights that never went off. When I went to flip the main ones back on, I noticed that the TV in the main break area was off. Surprised, I abandoned my search for the light switch and wandered over to the TV. I couldn't recall another time it had been off since I lost access to the remotes, and it occurred to me then that I didn't hear any speech or music other than the droning. As I got closer to the screen, the noise grew stronger. I was shamefully close to the television before I realized that it wasn't off. Rather, the picture was only showing a dark screen, with nothing but a straight red line horizontally bisecting the unit. I cocked my head to the side and turned my ear towards it, straining to see if I could make anything out. Finally, I grabbed one of the chairs from the nearby table and clambered onto it, determined to turn it off and get back to my show. As soon as I was stretched up on my toes, straining for the power button, the sound changed. 2 thumps blared out of the speakers, and I was so startled that I toppled off of the chair and barely kept myself upright on the ground. The line on the screen had moved in time with the change, suddenly reminding me of the machine my grandmother had been attached to after her heart attack. The beats happened again, echoing off of all of the walls, making it impossibly loud in such a large space. I walked over to the other break area to check that TV and found the same there. Scared now, I walked to the third, trying to convince myself it was simply a prank that my friend on the day shift had decided to set up for me since I couldn't compete in the costume contest this year. When I got to the third, however, my heart faltered. Instead of a line, this one showed a 10 in the same red but looked handwritten. Jagged and harsh, the pixels seemed wet, almost dripping. My pulse raced wildly as I swayed back and forth to look at it from different angles, desperate now for some sign that this was all staged. When the 10 flashed over to a 9, I jumped and stumbled back toward my desk. With each number in the countdown, a beep filled the office, speeding me up at the same time it made me flinch. I was throwing everything in my bag when the final beep rang out and the knocking started. Knocking may be the wrong word, it sounded more like fists slamming against wood, and I could hear it from all 4 doors to the stairwell. When I gasped, whatever was there must have heard me, as it began growling and snarling. Cracks accompanied the banging, and I could see the door closest to me beginning to splinter. I dropped my purse and ran toward the elevator, desperately pushing the down button and hopping from one foot to the next as if that would speed up my escape. Finally, the light on the wall flashed and I ran into the car and slammed my finger against the door close button just as crashing signaled the doors had fallen under the force of whatever waited behind them. The lobby was quiet and dark as I fled out to my car and drove away, locking my house door behind me and holding a knife to my chest. Nothing ever came of that night, other than my firing. Satanic activity wasn't a valid excuse for leaving in the middle of a shift without supervisor permission, and the doors were perfectly fine by the time anyone got in the next morning. After that, I took a job at a restaurant. The pay is even worse, but the hustle and bustle leave me no time to listen or be alone. Most importantly, every night, they turn off the TV. This is why I don't work the night shift anymore. Why do I always end up in this situation? Do I have the kind of face or personality that screams she should work the night shift? Every job I manage to land, I'm stuck with the latest, loneliest shifts. Sure, maybe it's because I'm constantly moving and switching jobs, so I end up with the crappy shifts no one wants, but after enduring the same lonely nights at 5 different fast food places, it's starting to feel a bit personal. Well, anyway, at least this place doesn't have a lot going on at night. Very few people want ice cream at midnight, especially in the dead of winter, so it's mostly just making sure the stockroom and freezer are organized for the morning shift, and then I get to sit on my phone for the rest of the night. It was actually kind of odd that I got this job in the first place. I moved into town a few weeks ago and started scoping out the job postings on the local classified sites. This place has had this opening posted for months. I know the night shift sucks, but in a town this size, it's odd that one of the local high school kids hasn't snatched up this laid-back job where you get to play on your phone for pretty much your entire shift. I haven't had a chance to talk to anyone else who works here since I work alone, but when I tried to ask the manager who showed me around my first day, she was very shifty about why the post had been up for so long. Well, for tonight I've finished up in the back room, and now I'm going to sit back and watch something, maybe The Office or Superstore. Nothing too intense since it can be a bit spooky sitting here all alone. The nearest building is a Mexican drive-thru restaurant that closes at 11 p.m., so I'm pretty much all by myself out here after that. Just as I'm settling in, there's a huge crash from the stockroom. It's so loud and unexpected that I let out an ear-piercing scream that scares me even more. I run into the storage room and find the shelf that usually holds the boxes of napkins and plastic utensils knocked completely over, and plastic spoons everywhere. I start to laugh at how ridiculously long this is going to take me to clean up, and then a shiver runs down my spine. How did this heavy metal shelf fall over? It doesn't look like anything knocked it over, or that it collapsed. It just fell over on its own. I know that's impossible. The whole thing had to weigh at least 100 pounds, all loaded up like I know it was. This is creepy. Is there someone or something in here that pushed the shelf over? I try to laugh my silly idea off, but the sound dies in my throat, and something pushes this shelf over. I just hope it's a family of raccoons or something that made their way in here, not some creeper living in the back room that's going to murder me when I find his hiding place. Okay, I'm being ridiculous. I just need to clean up this disaster and then get back to my show and relax. I get the shelf right side up with a lot of effort and start working on the spoons. Do I throw them out or do I just put them back in the box and not tell anyone? At that exact moment, I decided to be responsible and threw the spoons away. The soft serve machine in the front started making a loud noise. I know that noise, that's a bunch of ice cream being served. And then more crashing sounds. What the hell? What is happening here? I run to the front of the store and see the soft serve machine running at full speed, ice cream going everywhere, and more plastic utensils all over the floor. I look up from the mess of ice cream just in time to see the front door slamming behind one of the tallest men I've ever seen who's running away from the store. Okay, that's it, something is going on here, and I'm not sticking around to find out what. I leave the store right then and there, barely remembering to lock the door behind me. My boss is understandably furious with me. From her perspective, I've knocked over a month's supply of napkins and utensils, wasted a couple of gallons of ice cream, and didn't bother to clean any of it up. My claims of a creeper living in the back of the store don't do much to convince her. Instead, she pulls me into the manager's office and starts playing the security footage from last night. We both watch the storage room footage and see the shelf start to vibrate completely by itself and then go crashing to the floor. I feel like saying something along the lines of "I told you so" when my blood runs cold. On the other screen, walking in the front door, is the incredibly tall man. The video keeps playing and we watch as the soft serve handle moves itself, gushing ice cream onto the floor. The tall man seems surprised by this, and then the utensil station explodes, sending spoons everywhere. The tall man runs out of the store just as I run to the front from the storage room. I turn to my manager expecting her to share my surprise in what we just saw. But instead, she's sobbing uncontrollably. When she finally calms down, I learn why the night shift has been open for so long. The last girl who worked here was murdered in the store, which is why they added the security cameras, and the killer was never caught. The Mexican restaurant's security system did catch an image of a very tall man going in and out of the shop that night, but that's all the info they had. It feels like my heart stops when she tells me this. I don't know what to say or do. All I know is I'll never work a night shift again. I worked the night shift at a hospital. There was a list of strange rules. Having to spend your nights awake and your days asleep is not made for everyone. This hasn't been a problem for me as a kid since I never managed to fall asleep at night and ended up sleeping during class. I lost count of how many times I woke up to my teacher shouting my name and my classmates staring at me. When I turned 16, I had to start thinking about what career I wanted to pursue. Because I usually am wide awake at night, I figured I could become a security guard who works the night shift. I look intimidating as I am tall and often go to the gym, so my sole appearance would tell people not to try and mess with me. Although I'm not as tough and strong as I look. That being said, it appears my experience in the field has led me to quite a unique job opportunity. My boss approached me and asked if I was interested in guarding a hospital for 3 days. He mentioned the job would pay exceptionally well compared to my previous jobs, as it requires experience and a trustworthy person. The opportunity of working in a hospital has not yet been offered to me during my time working here, and it seemed like quite a challenge. If I managed to fulfill the job as expected, it might also result in a salary increase. I accepted the offer wholeheartedly, as declining would be foolish. I remember my boss looking relieved upon hearing my response. Supposedly, he struggled to find any other security guards willing to take on the job. You will start next week on Thursday. Make sure to be there before 10 p.m., he said, shaking my hand. I shook his hand with a huge smile on my face, an aesthetic to get started. You bet, sir. In the days leading up to the assignment, I guarded a few uneventful shifts at various places, such as a university and a McDonald's. I was happy, however, when the day of the unique opportunity arrived. Not wanting to be late, I drove to the hospital around 8 p.m. It's only a 30-minute ride, but you never know what might happen. I also figured getting to know the place wasn't such a bad idea. I mean, how am I supposed to guard a building I don't know the layout of? I didn't want to screw this up, as it pays me 3x what I usually make. It was surprisingly busy on the road, which led me to arrive at the hospital around 8:40 p.m. I got out of my car and made my way to the front door. The building seemed medieval, as it was made from bricks and had this Romanesque charm. The building wasn't big, it's rather small. From the outside, it seemed the building had 3 floors with short hallways. I pushed the front door open and greeted the lady at the counter. Her smile radiated a welcoming, soothing feeling, easing me of any nerves in an instant. Hello, I believe I was hired for the night shift at this hospital. I'm a bit early though, I was supposed to start at 10 p.m. What's your name, darling? She asked, maintaining her inviting smile. I'm Jake, I replied confidently. She started typing on the PC in front of her, seemingly checking whether I was speaking the truth. I mean, you never can be too sure. Some crazy people would pretend to be a night shift security guard. Is your boss Michael? Yes, ma'am. All right. One of the other security guards will be here shortly to explain the procedures. Would you like a cup of coffee in the meantime? I would love a cup of coffee. Could it be black? I asked with a grateful face. She chuckled and left to get me my coffee. A few minutes later, she returned with a cup of coffee. It tasted amazing, unlike I've tasted before. Everything seemed to fall right in line because a security guard approached me right as I finished my coffee. The security guard looked at me with skeptical eyes, judging my appearance before saying, "You must be the security guard, huh?" I didn't expect someone so young to show up for the job, but that doesn't matter if you do as I say. I got out of my chair and held out my hand to shake his hand. Nice to meet you, sir. I assume you will be showing me around? I asked confidently. I was always taught that it's important to look confident even though you might not feel confident, as it leaves a positive impression on the people you work for. However, the security guard in front of me, 6 feet 7 inches and quite the physique, made it difficult for me to not feel intimidated. Follow me, he ordered. I followed him and we made our way to the security room. He proceeded to show me how the cameras operate and gave me a tour around the building. He told me some basic security rules which I've heard too many times. Oh, there's one last thing, he mentioned as he was leaving. You see that paper on the desk? Read it. It contains a list of rules that you must follow. If you don't, we'll know. I hope you are professional enough to take them seriously and follow them, no matter how bizarre they might seem. I looked at him dumbfounded, but swiftly regained my composure and assured him I would follow the rules. Good luck, kid, he said as he left the room. I watched him leave as the clock positioned above the door told me that it was 9:30 p.m., which meant I had 30 more minutes before my shift officially started. The paper stated a total of 7 rules. Rule 1. Your shift will begin at 10 p.m. Make sure that you are inside the security room by that time. From 10:15 p.m. until 11 p.m., you are required to patrol the building to ensure that no individuals are present. If you encounter anyone, kindly ask them to leave. Rule 2. Somewhere between 11 p.m. to 3 a.m., a young woman could appear, knocking on the front door asking to see her husband. Ignore her completely and pretend she isn't there until she goes away. Rule 3. Ensure that the lights inside the intensive care unit remain on throughout your shift. If they happen to turn off, make your way over there and turn them back on. If you hear screaming while the lights are off, run towards the nearest bathroom and stay there until the screaming stops. Then proceed to turn the lights on. Rule 4. If there's a little girl with a teddy bear in the cafeteria, sit next to her and don't say a word. If she looks at you, walk back to the security room. If she speaks to you, talk back until she leaves. Rule 5. Around 1 a.m., go to the general ward and check on the patients. If one seems to be sitting on their bed, ask them if they're okay and do whatever they request. If they strike up a conversation besides this, ignore it. Rule 6. If it starts raining, open the front door and let people in for shelter. Make sure everyone you let inside leaves the building. If someone seems to be missing, you will see them on the security cameras. Do not look at them. Rule 7. If the security cameras were to turn off anytime throughout the night, hide and pray for your life they won't find you. I put the paper bag down on the desk and leaned back in the chair. I laughed at the sheer bizarreness of the situation. I must be getting pranked. I thought to myself, though deep down, I did not believe it was a prank. This was a hospital, and it seemed unlikely my boss would go to such lengths for a joke. Perhaps this was his way of seeing how much he could trust me, to see if I would follow such foolish rules. I reread the rules once again to make sure I understood them. I sure as hell was going to show my boss that he could count on me. The clock struck 10 p.m., and I turned my attention to the security cameras. With not much happening on the security cameras, and only having 15 minutes until I was supposed to patrol, I felt my attention slowly falling towards my phone, the best way to waste your time. Spending time looking at memes and stupid internet news sure does go by quickly. It felt like I barely had spent time on my phone, yet it was already 10:15 p.m. I left my cozy chair, stretched my legs, and made my way out of the security room. I figured that starting at the highest floor and descending my way down would be the best course of action, so I made my way to the highest floor. Thankfully, there was an elevator, so I did not have to bother using the stairs. I made my way up the highest floor and started checking all the rooms, hallways, and even the bathrooms. As I expected, nothing special happened. The thing about working the night shift as a security guard is that someone must be at the location in case something happens. However, this does not mean anything will happen, making it a boring, easy way to earn money. On top of that, I get to grab coffee and snacks whenever I want. No one seemed to be on the third floor, so I decided to descend to the second floor of the building. After patrolling the second floor, I reached the conclusion I had set for myself beforehand, nothing special. I grabbed my phone to check the time and see if I needed to hurry. It was 10:32 p.m. when I finished the second floor, giving me enough time to explore the first floor. It did strike me as weird, however, that there was no one in the hospital. I expected a hospital to always have doctors and patients in the building, as that's the entire point of a hospital. However, every room I checked so far has been empty. If my boss was indeed trying to test me, he did not go all in on the preparations. Despite that, I proceeded to the first floor, which contained the intensive care unit, security room, front door, and cafeteria. I planned to pass through the ICU and main hall area first, so I could finish off with the cafeteria and get myself a snack. As I made my way through the ICU, I was caught by surprise when I noticed an old man, around 70 years old, standing in one of the rooms. Wonderstruck for a bit, I recalled rule number 1, if you encounter anyone, kindly ask them to leave. Suddenly, everything fell into place. I realized that my boss had likely hired an actor and allowed him inside the building to test my adherence to the rules. With a sigh, I made my way toward the man. "Excuse me, sir, you are not supposed to be here at this time. I would like to kindly ask you to leave," I firmly asserted to the old man. The old man looked at me without saying a word, appearing confused by what I had told him. "Sir, I would kindly like to ask you to leave," I repeated. He nodded his head in agreement and followed me out of the building. "Have a good night, sir," I told him as he walked away. Right before he completely vanished into the darkness, the old man unexpectedly spoke. "Be careful of the surgeon." What did he mean by that? I quickly realized my boss must have told him to say that to scare me, so I quickly disregarded it. I continued my patrol around the floor. No one else seemed to be on the first floor, so I grabbed another cup of coffee and a croissant from the cafeteria. As it was 10:53 p.m., I made my way back to the security room. Once inside, I leaned back in my chair and played some games on my phone, confident no one was in the building, and I had nothing to worry about. After playing games on my phone for a while and finally checking the time, I was surprised to see it was nearly midnight. I had spent over an hour playing games on my phone. I shifted my attention to the security cameras, scanning for any anomalies. My heart skipped a beat as I noticed the lights of the ICU were switched off. I cursed at myself for not paying attention, as I had no idea how long the lights had been switched off, and the rule stated to turn them on as soon as possible. I got out of the security room to turn on the lights. As I walked toward the ICU, I froze in my steps. The sound of people screaming was deafening. I was baffled by the situation, unsure if my boss would have gone this far just to see how far I would follow the rules. The agony in the screams was noticeable and raised my anxiety. That's when I heard a door open and close, followed by footsteps making their way towards my location. Without hesitation, I bolted to the bathroom on the first floor and locked myself in one of the toilets. I tried to gather my composure and make sense of the situation I found myself in. I couldn't seem to understand how it was possible for anyone to even be in the building. Their screams of agony felt so realistic that they left no room to think this was staged by my boss. Those screams were real. Before I could fully reclaim my composure, the bathroom door swung open, and the same footsteps I heard before walked inside. I tried to stay as silent as possible, not knowing if the person had a weapon. For a second, the silence was deafening until the person started whispering a song to himself. "Welcome to the hospital, welcome to the hospital. You can come, but you can't go. Welcome to the hospital, welcome to the hospital," he murmured as he knocked on the doors of every bathroom stall. I jumped when he knocked on mine, the sound noticeably louder than with the others. Through the gap beneath the door, I could see his feet on the other side, completely motionless. "Is anyone there?" he said with a deranged tone. "Open up, don't be shy," he continued. My heart pounded in my chest as I held onto the silence. I remained frozen, praying he would soon leave me alone so I could get the hell out of there. The man persisted, knocking on the door in an attempt to gain any reaction out of me. "Come on, Jake, I need your help with something," he cried out desperately. I felt my blood turn cold at the sound of him mentioning my name, unsure as to how he could have known it. I stayed still and did not make a sound. After a couple of minutes, he gave up and walked out of the bathroom. Right before he left, one more sentence left his mouth. "See you soon, Jake." I did not leave the bathroom for another 10 minutes until the screaming had finally stopped. I unlocked the bathroom stall I was in and slowly opened the door that led towards the main hall, making sure no one was in sight. I exited the bathroom and slowly made my way to the ICU to turn the lights back on. Right after I turned the lights on, I ran towards the security room, as it suddenly felt like the only safe place in the building. As I let myself fall into the cozy chair, I looked at the time displayed on my phone, which indicated 12:51 a.m. Still full of adrenaline from what had just happened, I quickly reread all the rules to see if I had acted the way I was supposed to. Thankfully, that was the case. As I got to Rule 5, I was given a lovely reminder to check up on the patients around 1 a.m. and fulfill any wishes they had. Though I was not too sure if I was ready for another endeavor, I was more afraid of what might happen if I didn't oblige to the rules. Despite this, during my patrol I did not see anyone in the patient rooms, so how could there be anyone? I made my way up the stairs, this time reluctant to use the elevator, feeling like it might stop working. Besides, it's only one floor, so I might as well use the stairs. As I stepped on the second floor, my heartbeat started increasing slightly, as I did not know what to expect. As I made my way to the patients, I started to hear excessive coughing from one of the rooms. I decided to go past the rooms one by one, to make sure I did not skip any of them. As I peered into the first room, hoping to see nothing except an empty room, I was disappointed. In the bed laid an old woman, apparently sleeping. She had 2 tubes inside her nostrils and a needle in her arm. This is when I realized I hate the sight of people in these conditions. In every room were patients who seemed either extremely sick or extremely wounded. Whilst making my way through the hallway, the coughing sound became louder as I slowly made my way toward the source. Of course, it was in the last room. In case it was that maniac in the bathroom from before, I'd have to run the farthest. All the other patients were sleeping. As I made my way to the last and final room, I took a deep breath before walking in. Despite my nervousness, I stepped into the doorway and looked at the man. The man was sitting on the bed, elbow in front of his mouth, and coughing like he had been the past few minutes. When he noticed me, he tried to speak. "What? T.E.R." he muttered, trying to stop his coughing. For a second, I was caught off guard. This guy seemed to be an actual patient. I even felt pity for him. I couldn't imagine what it'd be like for him. I quickly ran down to the cafeteria to grab a cup of water and bring it to him. As he saw me standing in the doorway, his hand signaled me to come closer and hand him the cup of water. I walked towards him and handed it to him. He drank it so fast that I figured he had beaten a world record. He collapsed on his bed and thankfully stopped coughing. "Thank you," he exclaimed. "No problem, man, you seemed like you needed it," I replied. After a minute of sitting in silence with the man, I figured it was time for me to leave the room. I did what he asked. Besides, he didn't seem to be much of a chatter. He was just happy to have had his water. As I made my way to the door and wanted to grab the handle, he spoke. "Where are you going?" "Come sit with me, my friend." A chill went down my spine as I heard him speak. His entire tone changed from before and he sounded serious. I slowly turned my head back to him, realizing I had no choice but to do what he asked. I sat down next to him on the bed. "What's up?" I tried to say confidently but failed in doing so. "I'm not going to hurt you, son. I appreciate you helping me. You see, the surgeon stuffed a can of cinnamon down my throat, which led me to be unable to breathe. I wanted to tell you to be careful because he's still wandering the building. He stuffed cinnamon down your throat? I asked in disbelief. That's when I remembered what the old man from before had said. Be careful of the surgeon. Yes, he did. I wanted to warn you. This seems to be your first time here. I figured you'd like to know there's a maniac inside the building. If you do what the rules say, kid, you'll be fine. I looked at him with fright. After taking a deep breath and standing up, I thanked him and made my way out of the room. Thankfully, he did not ask me to come back. I made my way to the security room. My pace increased when I heard something falling on the third floor. In no multiverse would I have gone upstairs to check what was going on there. If I followed the rules, I'd be fine. I grabbed the door handle of the security room and closed it as soon as I was inside. A wave of relief crashed over me as I once again felt safe. When I looked at the clock above the door, it indicated the time was 1:53 a.m. I sat down in the chair and once again read the sheet of paper. Thankfully, no more rules were telling me to go outside the security room. I prayed to God the rest of the night would be as boring as all my previous jobs had been. I felt relieved knowing my shift ended at 6 a.m., which meant I only had 4 hours left to go. I could tell the events that occurred this eventful night had taken a toll on my energy, as I felt quite exhausted. Whilst staring at the security cameras, I felt my eyelids slowly closing and my mind drifting away. I fell asleep in the chair, completely forgetting about where I even was to begin with. I woke up around 2:45 a.m. and gave my body and mind some time to adjust to reality, as I had no clue where I was when I woke up. After a short while, I came back to my senses when I realized I was in the middle of a night shift. Awake, though still feeling the effects of waking up, I made my way to the cafeteria to grab myself a cup of coffee. I figured it'd help me stay awake for the rest of the night. I walked into the empty cafeteria and made my way to the coffee machine. I watched the coffee pour into my cup, entertained by the sight of it. As I turned around to go back to the security room, I jumped and spilled the coffee all over my suit. Although no one was in the cafeteria when I walked in, there now was a little girl sitting at one of the tables. Unsure of what the rules exactly said about this occurrence, I tried my best to remember the rules. My train of thought was interrupted once I noticed the little girl had turned around and was now staring at me. She had a small, white skirt and a pink t-shirt and blonde, curly hair going just as far as her shoulders. In her hand she held a teddy bear with buttons as eyes, except one of the eyes was hanging on by a thread. She looked at me without any expression on her face, making me feel uncomfortable and uncertain as to what I should do. All I could remember from the rules was that I had to sit next to her. Though I was reluctant and not entirely sure, I felt like it was the safest course of action. In the end, it was only a little girl. I sat next to her, her eyes intently staring at mine. She did not say a word for a long time, and I felt extremely uncomfortable, unsure of when I could leave. That is when she started giggling, covering her mouth with one hand, whilst still holding her teddy bear with the other. "You forgot the rules," she said in a frightening and teasing tone. I looked at her confused, thinking I had remembered them correctly. She could see the panicked look in my eyes, enjoying the sight of it. "Want to play hide and seek?" she excitedly asked. "I'll count to 60 and then we will look for you." I did not bother to ask who he was. She looked at me like a kid looking at candy in a candy store. I ran to the security room, leaving my coffee next to the little girl. As I ran away, I could hear her counting. 1, 2, 3, forever with me you'll be. 4, 5, 6, in the darkness you'll cease to exist. I locked myself in the security room and quickly grabbed the rules as I reread Rule 4. If there's a little girl with a teddy bear in the cafeteria, sit next to her and don't say a word. If she looks at you, walk back to the security room. If she speaks to you, talk back until she leaves. My throat turned dry as I realized my mistake. As I realized I had broken one of the rules, I remembered her mentioning hide and seek. That's when suddenly, all the security cameras turned off. Rule 7. If the security cameras were to turn off anytime throughout the night, hide and pray for your life they won't find you. I completely lost it as I did not know what to expect nor where to hide. All I knew was that the security room was too obvious for me to stay in, as there was no way I could escape from there. Overtaken by adrenaline, it felt like my body was moving on its own. I reached for the front door and frantically tried to open it. The door didn't budge, no matter how hard I kicked. 52, 53, 54, 55, prepare to run for your life. The little girl sang from inside the cafeteria. Despite feeling mentally overwhelmed, making me feel dizzy and close to passing out, my body had gotten a mind of its own. I ran up the stairs to the second floor, to the room of the patient I had given a cup of water. I opened the door to his room, only to see he was no longer there. That did not matter to me at that point, however, as I just wanted to find a proper hiding spot. By the time I was inside the room, I could already hear the little girl frantically laughing and singing as she had counted to 60. Unsure of how long I had left before she would be coming to this room, I decided I had to hide as soon as possible. I looked around the room for any suitable hiding spots, but there seemed to be none. The best option I seemed to have was to get inside the ceiling, as it was made from plates that could be pushed up. I stood on the bed to get closer to the ceiling and hopefully pull myself up. I accidentally kicked the photo from the nightstand next to the bed. The sound of it hitting the ground echoed throughout the entire building. I heard that. She screamed as I heard her running towards my location. Completely freaked out and realizing I had to be quick, I jumped as high as I could and held onto the ceiling, pulling myself up as fast as I could. I could tell the ceiling wasn't made for any person being on top of it, as every little move I made caused the ceiling to cave. Once I made it up above the ceiling, I blocked off the square hole and laid completely still, not wanting to make a sound or have the chance of the ceiling falling. I could hear the little girl enter the room excitedly, tiptoeing around. "I know you are in here. I heard you drop something," she said in a playful tone, enjoying every second of it. My heartbeat skyrocketed throughout the entirety of the situation, unsure whether she would find me or not. She poked into the ceiling with a broom, trying to figure out if I was there or not. Though I almost jumped once I felt the vibrations of the broom touching the ceiling, I managed to lay still and not make a sound. "I guess you're not here, then," she said disappointingly as she walked out of the room and continued to keep searching. I could feel the ceiling giving in to my weight, which meant I had to find a different hiding spot. After a couple of minutes and making sure she was no longer nearby, I slowly descended back into the room, being as quiet as I could. I peered my head into the hallway to see if anyone was there, but no one was in sight. I made my way through the hallway with the smallest steps I could make, flinching at every sound I heard. I figured I should hide on the first floor since she had already checked the entire floor. Though I did not know exactly where she was, I figured she would be upstairs. I slowly made my way downstairs, making sure no one was there. As I heard her shoes touching the floor of the floor above me, I knew I was safe to walk on the first floor for a while. This seemed to be a horrible conclusion because the moment I turned the corner, I could see the silhouette of a man standing near the ICU. I could see his face turn to me. I quickly jumped behind the wall, hoping he had not seen me. "What is a patient of mine doing out of his room so late?" the man asked. Realizing I did not have long before he would be here, I had two options. My first option was to go back upstairs and hope I would not encounter the girl and maybe find a hiding spot there. The second option was to run to the bathroom once again in hopes I'd be safe there. I didn't like either of those options, as I felt either of them would lead to me getting caught. Though I did not feel like I had the time to go back upstairs at all, I quickly ran towards the bathroom. Right before I wanted to enter the bathroom, I noticed the janitor's closet right underneath the stairs. Feeling like it was my best chance of survival, I opened the door and hid myself behind a container and a pile of trash bags. "Come on now, I need to inspect your organs," the man proclaimed as I heard him open the bathroom door. His voice sounded familiar, but at first, I did not seem to understand why. That was until he finished searching the bathroom. "You were smart enough to hide somewhere else this time. I'm impressed you are not as stupid as you look," he said as I realized who he was. The guy sounded exactly like the maniac I had encountered before. My blood froze at the fact that he knew where I was all along. He opened the janitor's closet and looked around for a bit, but decided it was too small for someone to hide in, so he closed it soon after, leaving me in utter darkness, horrified to do anything. I stayed in there for the rest of the night, not getting out until I knew it was completely safe. I could hear a drill, followed by a man screaming in agony. The man, who I assumed was the surgeon, laughed maniacally. I grabbed my phone to see how long I had left until the nightmare was over. 5:45 a.m. Only 15 minutes left until the staff of the hospital would come in for their daily shift. I just had to hold on for a little bit longer. I ended up falling asleep in the closet, feeling completely hopeless and defeated, exhausted from the night I had witnessed. I was woken up by a kind old man who seemed to be the janitor, who seemed surprised to see a security guard hiding behind his equipment. "Rough night?" he asked, though he knew the answer based on my expression. "It's over, you can come out now." I got back on my feet and walked back into the hallway. The hospital looks completely different during the day than it does at night. Instead of being unsettling, it seemed like a nice place. I thanked the janitor for his kindness and got the hell out of that place. I drove home and collapsed on my bed. I still could not comprehend what I had witnessed. It all felt like a fever dream. I told my boss I was sick and did not bother to answer his phone calls. After a week, I returned to my regular, uneventful shifts. Though the boredom might be horrible, I do not mind it at all. In the end, anything is better than having to spend the night in that hospital.